It's time for a full draft recap, but it comes down to one simple question. Was Will Johnson the steal of the draft? And was that the impetus for Monty Ossenfort to triple, quadruple, quintuple down on defense when they went defense, when it maybe wasn't expected before the draft started? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It was Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Going into year 9 hosting this damn podcast, okay? I feel like I've lived 7 lives. It's filled with dysfunction. It's filled with not a whole lot of fun to talk about aside from, some specs here and there. But now I feel like there's a jet stream coming and things are going to completely change. And we're starting to see it in front of our very eyes. To discuss this, one of my dear buds in the space, Donnie Druin, Sports Illustrated Arizona Cardinals writer, joins me. What's up, dude?
Did you say impetus in the opening? You know better than to use big words around me that I don't know, man.
Donnie, luckily you have an editor. It's fine. Like I tell people that I've got 2 smart things to say a month. That's my quota. Now, Donnie, I do need to apologize to everybody. This has been fun the entire time. It just sucks when the Cardinals are bad. I have to be negative all the time, and I don't like that. Now, since the end of the 2022 season, we've started to see this slowly but surely methodical, boring nature of building a team, and poof, now the Cardinals may have a top 7 defense. And it happens seemingly overnight, but it was, about 1,000 days. Donnie, going into the draft, what was your choice at 16 position-wise if you could have picked? Give me 2, because it could have been 7 options.
There really could have been, and I think that's why the draft was so hard to predict, Alex. I think if you maybe narrowed it down to 2 positions, I would have gone probably either corner or edge. Okay. You can make arguments for receiver, defensive line, offensive line. I would have heard every single one of them, and all of them made absolute sense. But probably those 2 positions, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, and from we're starting to see so much the inside looks into the war rooms of all the teams and everything. Yep. I think you knew. I think I knew. I saw a bunch of people tweet out about it. Also, it's like, you can't fake that excitement that Jonathan Gannon jumped into Monty Ossenfort's arms after they drafted Walter Nolen. Like, this was a well-kept secret. It used to be false leaks. It used to be nobody knows what the hell's going to happen. It seems like they knew they wanted that dude at 16 if he was there. With all the press conferences and everything after, did it seem like that? Or did it seem like it was a short list and he just maybe happened to be at the top of it?
No, Gannon was very, very adamant that Walter Nolen was the guy from the jump. And piecing back all of the breadcrumbs that the Cardinals had left us throughout the offseason, it made total sense. But obviously, with hindsight being 2020, it's so easy to look back and be like, oh, okay, that's who they were talking about. I distinctly remember being in Indianapolis, listening to Monty Ossenfort talk about how valuable an interior pass rush was and how that was one of the top things they look for in a defensive lineman. And they got a guy, a defensive interior lineman, with perhaps some of the best upside as a pass rusher in the draft, and a guy like Walter Nolen too. And I think maybe the character concerns may have put a lot of people off of Nolen and the Cardinals' radar, but they seemed very, very comfortable, very confident, and just a person that not only is he now, but the person who will be in the future. But no, Jonathan Gannon said during his press conference at the end of day 1 that a perfect day is him getting in the car, going on the way home, and Walter Nolen was an Arizona Cardinal, and that just spoke volumes.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Donnie Druin, Sports Illustrated, joining me. I was offensive line. I had you on a couple times over the offseason. I don't care. The way they did it, it just makes me think that Monty Ossenfort's ability to not only scout offensive line talent, which is what he's been proven to do at this point, but he thinks in-house is good enough. And if he thinks in-house is good enough, that's good with me. I mean, in the second round, I figured they could have taken an offensive lineman if Will Johnson didn't drop into their bleeping laps. Okay. I saw this as the turning point for the draft where it's like, okay, you can't pass on him again. Sure, he had turf toe. Sure, he had some sort of fugazi knee injury that He said after being drafted, he's been healthy for 2 years.
Yeah.
Was this the most important pick of the draft?
I have to agree with you that it was the turning point. I think that really bolstered the Cardinals' optics from good to great. When you can get Will Johnson at pick number 47, and yeah, there's the issues. There's the concerns about his long speed as a corner in the NFL. When you have a 6'2" guy who can run pretty good, not in terms of just speed, but he can cover receivers pretty good, can play man, can play zone. He's a guy who's very willing in run support. I think when you get a guy like that who can pretty much thrive in a Jonathan Gannon, Nick Rowley cover 3 defense. Yeah, and when Will Johnson is healthy, he's going to be a top 15 pick. So I think that's why it was so surprising. We talked to Will after he got drafted, and I have never. I've that was my 4th draft covering the team, Alex, and I've been so blessed to be in the facility to where we get conference calls with all of the players after every single pick after. That is the most pissed off I have heard any player that he dropped. So not only are you getting a talented guy, a guy who says that his knee has been healthy for 2 years, but you're also getting an extremely motivated guy coming with a chip on his shoulder, ready to prove literally everybody wrong.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I did a short after and I did some hits for Locked On and stuff. And this thing came to me in the middle. Like he had 3 pick sixes in his last 2 years. He only played 6 games last year. He had 2 pick sixes. He's kind of like a Saquon Barkley of corners. Like he's not gonna leave his fellow secondary out to dry. But if he sees an opportunity, the dude's got such a quick first step to collapse and intercept the ball and just house it. Like he's got
the Cardinals have not seen a corner like this since Patrick Peterson.
Yeah, which is fascinating. Even though it's fascinating to me because it's something that set the stage for the rest of the draft. And you look at Jordan Burch in the 3rd round, a guy they're just checking boxes of needs at this point on defense. It's like, oh, you need a young pass rusher, cool. This dude can do everything: interior, hand in the dirt, play off the edge. And he's one of the better players that Oregon State on the defensive side of the ball in years. And he's just sitting there in the 3rd round. It's like, are they getting lucky? Or is this something that it's like there were so many guys in this draft that were good that fell that they, were just able to take advantage of it?
I think it might be a little bit of both, but I think that's just a testament to Monty Austinfort and his scouting team. Like really, people will praise Monty, and rightfully so. He's the guy pulling the trigger and making all of these picks, but the job the Cardinals have done scouting the last 3 drafts and just assigning player values, and ultimately it's still kind of early to tell what the actual returns are on the past 2 drafts, but we like what we see so far, right? And we really like what we see out of the 3rd draft class. I think when you just focus on getting good football players, getting them in the building, regardless of position, I think ultimately that'll do more good than bad. And that goes into the whole argument of, they had 7 draft picks that took 6 defensive players. Like, are you buying that best pick available on the board was defense all of those rounds? Maybe not. But look at what Austinfort's done the last 2 years. You look at the job he did this past weekend. You have to trust the process at this point because the process is going pretty damn good.
I mean, that's close enough to a tease that I was going to say. So why all defense next segment? Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our dear friends over at FanDuel. NBA is in full swing, man. The playoffs are bonkers. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel, you place it for your first $5 bet. You'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So if your bet wins, you get $250 in bonus bets to play around with. You want to bet on who's going to win the championship? Good luck. There's a lot of 3-1 teams you didn't expect to be 3-1. There was games yesterday where series were closed out. So FanDuel's the place to get in on all the NBA action. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, joined by Donnie Druin from Sports Illustrated, one of my buds here. It's been a whirlwind since the end of last season, but what's the positive side of a whirlwind? Like a carousel? What's a positive? Like, because Ferris wheel scares people. Like, I don't know. Like, it's whatever the positive side of a whirlwind is, what we experienced after the Cardinals were unceremoniously removed from playoff contention in week 16 of last season. And this team is truly in name only the Arizona Cardinals. Everything has been done rationally. Everything has been done to check boxes. Donnie, why all defense? Answer your own question that you teased last segment. Why do you think all defense?
That's a great question. I think because I tried to break it down myself. That was one of the big takeaways I had is, I don't think 6 out of 7 picks on the defensive side of the ball is a mistake. I think it's intentional, especially after the free agency class that they had. Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson. To add 6 more guys on the defensive side of the ball, that's not chance. I'm sorry. There's no way you can convince me that BPA was defense 6 out of 7 times. And then the one time it was offense, it was a guard in the 6th round. What was it? Hayden Connor, shout out to him. But like, who knows? Maybe that goes back to the whole, like, Will Johnson changes everything, because if Will Johnson isn't there in the 2nd round, then maybe they go offensive tackle or maybe receiver, or maybe that changes the entire dynamic. But
yeah.
If some butts don't get paid in the NFL, right? Looking at the Cardinals' defensive numbers from last year, they were pretty middle of the road in most categories. To me, Alex, I really think they want to get this defense from good to great. And I think they have a lot of trust in their offense. I think that's why they didn't make too many additions on the offensive side of the ball. And the additions that they did bring in were depth. They really didn't change the makeup of the actual starting core from 24 to 25. And there's a bunch of arguments and talks we can get into later down the road about that. But I think they trust the continuity of the offense to improve from year 2 to year 3 under Drew Petzing. I think Petzing, they're expecting him to be better. I think the connection between Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. is supposed to be better. And we'll see what happens with the offensive line. But I think in their minds, if you can have that same level of offensive play consistently and turn that defense from, okay, it's gotten better under Nick Rallis to, hey, this is a top 7, top 10 unit in the league consistently week after week. We got dogs dominating the trenches up front. We have a playmaker in the secondary now with Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker behind them. I think they really sat down and said, look, like, we need to be versatile. We need to be adaptable. We need to be balanced. Let's get this defense from good to great and kind of roll the dice and see where that takes us.
Yeah. Agreed. It's what we've experienced, even when Vance Joseph was here for a couple years. It's both he and Nick Rallis, pseudo exponentially, greater or more efficiently elevated the hell out of the talent the Cardinals had on defense. Like, they haven't had a stud deep defense. They haven't had a cornerback 2014, Antonio Cromartie and Patrick Peterson. That was a decade ago, where you had 2 corners that you trusted to play outside on opposite each other. 10 years. And you had Chandler Jones, you had Carlos Dansby for a couple of years in the middle, Adrian Wilson, Budda. Like, this defense has never been on paper elite, at least over the last 20 years. So imagine what Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon could do with beasts, with actual studs. Like, it's something that, why all defense? I don't think. Well, you said you don't think it was an accident, and to a certain degree, I agree. I do think the Will Johnson thing changed everything, because it's like, okay, now you're completely out of the orbit of the top 7 offensive linemen. So it's like, well, why not double down and go on need? You need a young pass rusher, and it's going to be super cheap in the 3rd round, and it's a guy who can do a lot of things from Oregon. You got the defensive MVP from the national championship game in the 4th round from Ohio State. You got a corner from Ohio State in the 5th round who was a top 5 corner in many metrics 2 years ago. It's like, how is this happening? This draft isn't that deep, and they're just taking big name players from big name schools who have won national championships, who have been part of elite company, and who probably, this is the biggest thing for me, is like, these guys are playing with guys who are so much better than them. If these dudes were the number 1 in a smaller school, they may be getting drafted in the 1st or 2nd round. So when you look at situations like that, it's like, I can't contain myself. I'm finally at the point now where I think an elite defense is far superiorly sexier than an elite offense. Like, if your team can hold a team under 20 points in this day and age, sign me up.
Oh, for sure. I think that's the allure of it too, because if you can get that, like, a borderline good, great elite defense from the Cardinals in 2025, we've seen the highs of Kyler Murray. We know what running the football with 30 times per game with James Conner can do to a defense over the course of 4 quarters. We've seen the flashes from Marvin Harrison Jr. We know how good of a contested catch guy Michael Wilson is. Trey McBride's one of the best tight ends in the game. No longer the highest paid, but one of the best tight ends in the game, right? So there's a lot of understanding and excitement and thought behind that. I tell you who the biggest winner of draft weekend was from Arizona, Nick Rallis. If this defense takes the step everybody thinks they will in 2025, he's going to be head coach next year.
Yeah, later. Yeah, he's going to be gone. And that's so. And this is the thing where, and we're going to talk about this a lot, especially throughout the season, if that comes to fruition. I hope he Ben Johnson's it for 2 years. Give him $6 million a year. Pay him head coach money. Like, listen, but I think he's young enough. He's really smart. Like, he's a perfect metric for I don't know if he can pull off a hoodie as a head coach. I don't know if he could do the hoodie thing as head coach. I think as a DC, you can be like Darkwing Duck. You can kind of be the dark one, but then when you're the head coach, you kind of have to, show the
not the Belichick.
I don't know if he's a good comparison for really anything at this point.
No, it's just apparel.
Yeah, but no,
I guess recently he's not a good comparison for anything.
Yeah, I know he's not. So it'll be fascinating to see. It's a good problem to have. And with that, as we pivot into the offense, is the offense good to go? I'm going to ask you one question, then we'll get to it about the offense. How much, even though this was never stated because it can never be stated, how much of the offensive makeup and scheme last year was to mask the deficiencies on defense on the roster? How much more running was happening to eat clock and play calling to keep them on the field as long as possible, as opposed to taking shots, maybe having to have a 35-second 3 and out, where you're taking shots down the field to get back in the game? Like, how much of it was training wheels, do you think, if at all?
I think it might have been a good, balance. I think the Cardinals were smart enough to know that, hey, there were some defensive efficiencies that they could have tried to mask or overcome with the offense, trying to keep the offense on the field. But I'll be honest, I think that's just a Cardinals MO. I really, truly think that is a Gannon pet saying, hey, let's control the clock. Let's wear these guys out over 4 quarters. Let's run the ball, because if we're going to be a team in the postseason, we need to do that. Mm-hmm. Good teams are able to finish games in the postseason by running the football, and that's something the Cardinals can do very, very well. I do agree with you a little bit in terms of, hey, it's some of those problems, sure, were masked. Were done to cover up the lack of whatever defensively. How much more the offense opens up this year, I don't know. They still don't have that coveted deep threat that can take the top off of a defense. And that's no shot at Marv or Wilson or Dortch or anybody on that offense. But there's just no guy on that team that you can send over the top that'll open things up. That's also just not like a Drew Petzing special. Like, a lot of it's just run the ball, play action boot, let's get guys in space. Let's, instead of big 50, 60-yard plays, we're going to go down the field methodically. It's going to be 12, 13-yard drives. It's going to be James Conner a lot. It's going to be Trey McBride in the middle. It's going to be Marv or Michael Wilson here or there. Maybe a Kyler Murray run, sprinkle it in if you want to get fancy. I go back and forth on it, to be honest.
I think what you just said needs to change pretty drastically, and I'll discuss why next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Have you ever looked at your bank account? You're like, where the hell did my money go, man? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your dang wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. At Donnie Druin on Twitter, Sports Illustrated writer for Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals, in my opinion, have everything they need to be a top 10 offense. And I go back to what I used to say about Cliff Kingsbury. He puts together a great movie trailer, but a lot of the times the movie isn't very good. And when it comes to the Cardinals offense, it's a 74 on Rotten Tomatoes from what it actually should be. Like, there is no reason why this offense doesn't put up almost 30 points a game every week. And I think the 0-1 jump that needs to happen here is the wrinkle between being run first and run second a good chunk of the time, Kyler Murray needs to have the ball in his hands a lot more in 2025. Not only because we got to figure out if he's the dude, this is the year. Also, they have so many good skill position players on the outside. Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson are criminally underused, and this is Marv's next step in his career. Do you agree?
I would agree with all of that. The one thing I will add to that, Alex, is the Cardinals, more than almost anybody, their run schemes are very, very good. And I think as a result, they run the football very, very well. And that's a mixture of like athletic offensive linemen enough to make that happen. James Conner being the guy that he is, and then Drew Petzing kind of dialing that up. It's just schematically. I'm curious to see how the loss of Clayton Adams changes things, because I think Clayton Adams was very underrated, not only in terms of offensive line play, but just like the offense in general. So like I am keeping tabs on that. I think when you can run the ball like that, play action opens up a lot easier. And I will agree with you. We do need to see the ball in Kyler Murray's hands a lot more, but the only step back I have with that, the only drawback is what Kyler are we going to get? Are we going to get the Kyler Murray that we saw in the first half that was an MVP candidate, or are we going to get the Kyler Murray that we saw in the second half to where the ball is in his hands a lot? And how did that turn out?
Yeah, no, I get it. We're watching the same show every year, and I completely understand that. This is by far the most balanced and deepest 1-53 roster that Kyler has been a part of. Even the 2021 year, which was total fugazi, week 1 against Tennessee, defense turns the ball over, short field. False start, timeout, field goal. It's like, all right, nothing's changed here. Like nothing's changed. They won by 50, but nothing's changed. And then it was only a matter of time before we saw it. With this, I feel like getting the ball in his hands more, he's kind of like a sharpshooter. It's like you got to see a couple go in early. And when he's bored and say the run game doesn't work like it did in Seattle when they were lazy after their bye week, it's like, okay, the pass game always needs to be able to work. It can't just be predicated upon the run. And that's something that they've kind of had this lulled sense of security. Like, oh, James Conner was great during the first 10 weeks. That's not going to change ever. And then when you can't run the ball, the offense is anemic. With the skill, with the Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray, that should never be the case. So that's why I'd rather them be a quote-unquote pass-first offense where they run the ball more. It's one of those things where it's like, I want to see the ball go in with Kyler a lot early, because that will set the tone for the whole game. I know it seems like training wheels, but they got to figure it out, because this is the last year.
Though I would agree, and I will say Kyler's best games, I feel like last year, came when they weren't necessarily like leaning on the run too much. There was a balance. Being able to run the football effectively doesn't mean you have to do it every single down. Now, Is it a good idea? Probably, yeah. But I think to your point, that the games where Kyler thrived best, he was firing on all cylinders. And like I think when Kyler's doing that, when he's not forcing himself to chuck the ball deep to Marvin Harrison Jr. every 3 plays, he's taking the 5-7 yard routes that'll move the chains and keep the first downs coming. I think that allows him to get into a rhythm, and then that opens up a little bit more back end on the defensive side of the ball, allows him more space to maybe take off and run, which is something he likes doing personally, and I think he wants to do more of that in 2025. So it's always interesting, because football is one of those things where it's like a big puzzle to me, and like, yeah, there's pieces that need to go, but there's no correct order and what pieces need to go where. So many different things, so many different options for the Cardinals in 2025. But I think the good news is that they have the bandwidth to do both. They can throw the ball 30-35 times a game and win. They can run the ball 30-35 times a game and win. It doesn't matter. They should be able to do both. And if they want to be a postseason team in 2025, they'll need to do both at certain points of the season.
Yeah, and the fascinating part, and we're running out of time here, but like what they do on 4th down this year compared to what they do on 4th down last year with the great defense, I could see them going forward on 4th down like Philly numbers, like Detroit numbers on 4th and short. And that's something that he and Drew Petzing need to get in the lab with also, because the tush push is not an option for the Arizona Cardinals unless they have packages in place for Jacoby Brissett, which could, 100% be the case. Donnie, he just put out a great article, 3 free agents that the Cardinals should look at, one of whom, I'm going to bury the lead one because I talked about him yesterday, is Brandon Scherf. interior offensive lineman, can play guard for this team. Was super expensive, wouldn't be anymore. Tell them where they can find your work.
Yeah, at Donnie Druin on Twitter, or as the cool kids call it, X, and then sl.com/NFL/Cardinals.
Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.